Hey, what's going on, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. I'm excited today. I've got a really special guest today. I've got Tim Miller, who's with the NCEES organization. So he is actually the Chief Officer of Exams at the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying. Wow, that's big. And they shorten that to NCEES. So Tim is awesome. He actually helps develop and all the scoring and the exams for people that are becoming professional engineers. So he also helps to develop all the practice problems, the study guides, and all their publications to help engineers earn their license. So he's kind of a big deal there at the NCEES organization. It's going to be a really fun show to ask him lots of questions about the PE exam in general. But in his own life, he was a project manager and engineering consultant for 20 years. And he graduated from Virginia Polytech Institute and State University. And he is licensed in the state of South Carolina. So anyway, we are excited to have him on the show. Can't wait to share this one with you. And it's going to be coming right up. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm excited today. I've got a special guest here. I got Tim Miller with us from the NCEES. How's it going, Tim?
Going well, thank you.
Great. I think we'll just dive right into this. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy guy right now, dealing with a lot of stuff. So maybe just as a background, I have read that you got a civil engineering background, but how did you find yourself into the NCEES organization?
It's been an interesting journey. Yes, I have a civil engineering degree. Went to Virginia Tech. Worked for Bechtel right out of college in their nuclear side of things, and worked at a couple different nuclear plants. And then found myself in South Carolina working for consulting firms, mostly site development, that kind of thing. So I was not a specialist. I was more of a generalist. So I've done sewer lift station design, road design, railroad design, a lot of grading, stormwater detention, that kind of thing. And as I moved forward in my career, I was in project management, did a lot of industrial projects, and so it was very rewarding doing that. And then I started my own business as a kind of an owner's rep kind of thing, where I would work with owners, and I worked with banks and did work that they needed, where they needed some engineering guidance. And so I did that, and I happened to see that NCEES was looking for an engineer, and I had to be, at the time, was located in Clemson, South Carolina, and I had to be down there doing something for a bank. So I contacted them to see, hey, is there something I can help you with and all that? And well, we're not looking for, a consultant, but you sound like somebody who might work well here. Why don't you stop and see us? So I did. And so I started off working responsible for several exams, facilitating the development of those, and then was asked after a couple of years to move into this position where I'm actually over the development of all the exams. And so I've been here for 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I guess for people that don't know what the NCEES, explain just real quickly what it is and maybe just touch on the history.
Sure. Well, very, very quickly, if you want to be licensed in the United States as a professional engineer, you have to be licensed by your state licensing board. That's at the state level. And back in the day, and we're actually celebrating our 100th year anniversary, every state developed their own exams, did their own licensing, and then as engineers moved around, they were having to go take the exams in the other states if they wanted to be licensed there and do work. And the states got together and formed this council, and we're the national council, and so that they could recognize each other's credentials. And they did that for a number of years. And so they didn't have to take the exams in the other states. And then as things moved on, then in the 60s, they decided, why don't we develop one exam for the entire country to use? So then we know that we're all testing the same things. And so that's how kind of the council, so we're the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying. Obviously, an engineer and not a marketing person came up with that. And so we
Very
work for
true.
the state. We work for the state licensing boards, and we help them. I can't license anybody. I get accused all the time of holding up people's licenses and that I'm supposed to have all this authority and power, but I don't license anybody. We are responsible for the exams. That part of the licensure, the what we call the three-legged stool: education, experience, and exams,
Hmm.
that you need to have in order to be licensed in individual states. And we do other things that all further what the licensing boards are trying to do. So that's in a nutshell, that's what the council does. But there are definitely times where you need to talk to your licensing board and not us, but there are times that exam related questions will come to us, and then we have other services that we provide, a records program where
Hmm.
if you want to be licensed in multiple states, even when there was an exam, a common exam, you still had to go fill out all the paperwork in each state, provide a transcript, provide all your references, and the boards asked us to come up with a way to for us to house all that information and make it easier from a mobility standpoint for engineers to go from one state to another. So
Yeah, and that's very helpful.
yeah, if you develop a record with us, then we hold, you only have to send your transcript to us once, and then we hold your exam results and your references, and that has to be updated. And it's
Yeah.
free to develop this record. The only charge is if you transmit it. So if I have a record and I'm in South Carolina and I want to be licensed in Georgia, I would contact NCEES and say, please send my record to Georgia. There's very little paperwork that has to be done in that way. And then,
That's awesome.
yeah,
I've
so
also noticed just on your my NCEES account that you offer other things like you track PDHs. You can upload your certificates there and things of that nature. So it seems like the NCEES is very in touch with what engineers are needing and what the states are wanting, and trying to provide like a service to capture those things. Do you?
exactly. And that's free for any
Yeah.
engineer that wants to, have all, and we have all the CDC requirements, the continuing competency requirements for each state. And so, yeah, it's been very successful, and it just made sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. I've enjoyed that feature myself.
Good.
That's great. Let's dive into some good questions about the PE. We'll talk about COVID coming up too, but I kind of polled some of our audience members in Civil Engineering Academy, and I know right now things are a little nuts with COVID-19 and things of that nature, but maybe I'll start at the beginning. And some people just want to know in general how the PE exam is developed. So I know that's probably a 2-hour lecture, but maybe just some highlights.
Well, and like most probably of the people that are listening to this, I had no clue of how the exams were developed. I always assumed there were a group of professors somewhere locked up in an
Mm-hmm.
ivory tower, and they just wrote questions and everybody. But that couldn't be further further from the truth. It's a very detailed process, and yes, you're right. It's uh, it would take several hours to go through it, but there are, I'll skip over and hit some of the highlights. So, and so one question we always get is, well, how do you decide what topics are tested, and why are there so many questions in one topic and not another? Well, we don't
Mm-hmm.
decide that. We go through a process. It's called a PACS, PAKS, Professional Activities and Knowledge Study. And what we do is we put together a group of people, they're licensed engineers, and they come up with a list of knowledges and uh, things that someone entering the licensure field, so someone with 4 years experience and a college degree, what is important, what do they think is important for them to know in order to protect health, safety, and welfare and be able to
Mm.
uh, do work. And so we compile this list, and we use a testing consultant. You'll hear me say psychometrician. That's
Ooh.
the consulting group's That's what they do. They're testing consultants. They lead us through this process, and we develop a survey instrument that we then send out to as many licensed engineers as we can in that discipline, and say, how important is this for somebody with 4 years experience and an engineering degree, that they be minimally competent in this in order to protect health, safety, and welfare.
Hmm.
So we get all these responses back, and the things, they rate them on a 0 to 5 scale, 0 being not important, 5 being very important. And things that are above a certain level are, those are okay, those are topics that we'll test. Those that are below a certain level, all right, these aren't important, we won't test those. Some are in the middle, and that we discuss those as a group. This committee will discuss those, and if there's a rationale for including those, they will be. And so,
Hmm.
and then all that is approved. I have many bosses. I have a oversight committee over the engineering exams and one for the surveying exams, and that's made up of members from different state licensure boards. That's one of my oversight committees. They have to approve them. We come up with this specification. Here are the topics. And when we send out that survey, we are getting input on how many questions, or how, to determine how many questions are needed. So it's not us determining that, it's coming from the engineering field. It's coming from the community of licensed engineers.
Okay.
So don't
Yeah.
blame me if you think there's too many transportation or too many structural questions. Blame the licensed people who you work with that
That's
that fill out
interesting.
the survey for us.
So it's kind of like they're getting a pulse for, I guess, what is needed in society. I mean, is that a fair statement? I don't
It
know.
is, because it's to protect health, safety, and welfare. So it's
Yeah.
very important that, and this is something we do every 6 to 8 years for every exam that we have. We have over 30 different exams. If
Yeah.
we
Oof.
have 5 civil PE exams, the 7 fundamentals exams, we have a lot of, and so we do this every 6 to 8 years to make sure we're keeping up with technology,
Yep.
uh, to make sure that we are keeping up with what's going on in that discipline's community and what's important. Obviously, uh, you know, things change in the environment, and so it's important for us to continue to do that. So once we have that specification, then obviously we have to write items to do that. And we have volunteers, subject matter experts, that come in from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, we are now doing that virtually right now, and I'll talk about that later. Uh, but they come in and they help us write questions. And so, again, even when I was responsible for several of the exams, uh, I did not, it was not my job to be the technical expert. I was just a facilitator. So, for instance, I had the metallurgical and materials exam. I couldn't even understand what the question was asking, let alone how to answer it. But I have subject matter experts that do, and my job was to lead them through the process.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so
Well,
go ahead.
oh, I was just thinking, you touched upon technology, and I know a lot of exams have switched over to CBT, and it sounds like, which is computer-based testing, and it sounds like even with COVID, that's accelerated some of those exams. Where does the civil exam fall in line with that? Is it sticking with the date, I believe, of 2023? And I guess, what do you see are the benefits of the CBT, or are there even any drawbacks that you've seen?
Well, going from and those of you that have taken the exam and been to one of our pencil and paper exams, you have seen, it's in a very large room. A lot of people, might be a lot of people, a lot of references. It's a terribly large uh,
It's a big
process to
event.
go through all that. Yes, it is. And it's we're only able to do that. We do that twice a year. So in moving to computer-based testing, the advantages to that are, especially for the large volume exams like civil and all our fundamentals exams, we're able to use a process called linear on-the-fly testing. We use a lot of acronyms. That's LOFT.
Oof,
And what that
okay.
does is that allows us, so if you and I go to a testing center to take the same exam, what's your specialty in civil?
I did geotech.
Okay, so let's say we both went and took the geotech exam at the same time, and we sat next to each other. We would both be tested there would be 80 questions on the test.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they would all be over the same topics, but we're able to use this linear on the fly testing. Your questions will be different than mine, even though the forms, each of our exams will be unique. They are, from a difficulty standpoint, they are the same, and they are written around the same, the same ability level or the same score. And
Mm.
so that allows us to be able to test all year round, which when things get canceled or if there are issues, that gives us a lot more flexibility, and it gives the examinees a lot more flexibility that they can go take the exam when they want, where they want, and by where, it doesn't even have to be in the same state. So
Mm.
if I'm trying to apply to the South Carolina board, but I'm on a temporary assignment in North Dakota, one of the oil fields or something like that, I can take the exam at a Pearson VUE Test Center in North
Wow.
Dakota. And so that is, there's a tremendous flexibility level with that. Also, in the pencil and paper standpoint, it's a little different process in how the exams are. Uh, it's still the same level of psychometric or testing uh, process that we go through, but we have to do everything after the fact, and that's why it takes 5 to 6 weeks or longer to get the results out.
Mm-hmm.
With the computer-based testing, since we already know what the passing score is, we're able to build the forms around that passing score. We can get the results out in a week. So
Wow.
if you take the exam this week, you'll find out next week
That's way
your
better.
result. So that's a lot better. Now, as far as the civil exam, obviously that's we have already transitioned all our fundamentals exams. We started on the PE exams and have done a majority of those. Civil is obviously our largest one, and we wanted to wait and make sure. The biggest difficulty is with the references,
Mm-hmm.
because in a test center, you can't bring in your rolling book cart of references or your
Suitcase.
your child's red wagon. These are all things I have seen
Yes.
in the past. Yes, a rolling book cart that they unfolded, and uh, so that's just not feasible in the testing centers. So we have to make sure that we develop electronic references that contain anything that an examinee would need to know in order to answer questions that we wouldn't expect them to know
Sure.
automatically. And so that is a very detailed process that we have to work through with our volunteers, our subject matter experts, and we are actually pulling in the transition of the civil exam to CBT. It was going to be April of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
It will now be April of 2022. So we
Wow.
have pulled it in a year. Yes, wow. Uh,
You got a lot
uh,
of work to do.
we do have a lot of work to do, and we're looking at ways to see if we can pull it in even sooner, because obviously with COVID-19 and everything that's going on, we had to cancel the April exam, which affected some 16,000
Oh, wow.
examinees, and a majority of which were civils. That's our largest pencil and paper exam. And so we're trying to pull in. One thing we did for October, the electrical power exam is one that was going to be transitioned next April, and we actually pulled that in and we will start offering that in December,
Mm.
at the beginning of December. So what we did was we basically canceled all of the electrical power people from October and gave them back their money and said, you know, we're going to take you out of this pool so that we can offer more pencil and paper seats to other people who don't have this option in another month or so.
Wow.
So we've pulled that in, and that's, we've had there were, we didn't make these decisions lightly because it's a big deal going from these people were studying and prepared to bring in all their own references, and now they have a supplied reference that we will provide for
Yeah.
them. So they're having to change how they do that. But we have had, I think we have over 800 people have already scheduled their appointments in December. So many of them have already got their appointments scheduled, and we're glad that that was able to work.
Oh, good.
Our computer-based testing partner is Pearson VUE, and they had issues as well when COVID, when everything happened in March or so, and they actually had to close down their test centers for the month of April, and that
Wow.
affected some 7,000 CBT takers that had to get rescheduled. And when they opened back up in May, they opened up at half capacity so that they could have every other seat. And so that has affected, obviously, being able to get
Everyone.
appointments for everybody.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a lot going on.
Before we, I guess before we leave the CBT stuff, I mean, you've already hit a lot of positives. Would you think, I guess, do you think the only drawback to going CBT is that you're not able to bring in all your references? You're not able to bring in the suitcase anymore?
I think so, but most of our feedback has been positive. The mechanical engineers, we converted their exam and their appointments started in, would have started in April, ended up starting in May. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback from them because they had to go through the same process where in the past, it was bring in your own references, and now we have a supplied reference. And even with them, because they used, and not to be confused with psychometrics, but they're psychrometric charts,
Wow.
the refrigerant charts and all that, we had to come up with an electronic way for them to be able to draw all the lines they need to on these charts
Yes.
in order to
Steam
answer
tables.
questions. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have been able to do that as well, and we've gotten positive feedback. But yeah, certainly that's a concern that that we're aware of, is that people cannot bring in their own references. But for the
Yeah.
most part, it's been positive.
But you will be providing a resource for people to use. They're going to have
Yes.
a reference manual of some sort.
Yes, there will be a reference manual for all of the civil examinees, and then there will also be tabs for the appropriate codes and standards that we test on. So those will be provided, like
Oh, really?
something from ACI. We won't provide it for you electronically to study by, but
Uh-huh.
and we will tell you, here are the things that will be available to you. So especially a lot for the structural folks, have a good bit. If you look at our specifications, you
Yes.
will see at the end there's a list of codes and
Mm-hmm.
standards, and those will all be provided electronically
Oh,
uh,
wow. Yeah,
as well.
I forgot to ask that, but you definitely reminded me that there are quite a few standards, which is typically why people bring in a suitcase full of
Sure.
books. But so
And
those will
we're
all be
actually in
electronic. That's
Yeah, and
great.
we're actually in the process of working on some people have already found on our CBT page of our website that the date has changed from 2023 to
Mm-hmm.
2022. And so we've got questions on that. We were trying to get other things done before we made that announcement, but we're working on a press release now.
That's great.
So that'll be announced probably early next week.
So let's dive in. You've already touched a lot on COVID-19 and how it's affected you. How have you guys been able to stay on top of this? It just seems like there's so many changes happening all the time.
Well, there are, and it has been, and just like most everybody that's probably listening or watching this, we had the same issue in March. We basically had to send all our staff home and to work from home, and so that has been a challenge. And an extra challenge for us in this pandemic was we were in the process of moving our headquarters
Mm.
from
Got a new
Clemson.
building, right?
We do, from Clemson, South Carolina to Greenville, South Carolina, which is about 50 miles. I'm actually in our new building right now, and it's a beautiful building. I think on our website there's actually a video tour that
Mm-hmm.
explains it, but it's 75,000 square foot. Actually, CH2M Hill, it used to be their office, and
Oh, really?
when they were bought out by Jacobs Engineering, they all moved to a large Jacobs office here in Greenville, and so we were fortunate enough to be able to get the building, and we've been renovating it, and we had to renovate it during this pandemic, and so fortunately our contractor was able to keep going, and so that's been difficult, but we're now starting to bring some staff back in, and hopefully we'll have staff back in after the first of the year. That's the plan. But yes, it has been a challenge because, as I mentioned earlier, we work with, that we have over 800 volunteers that we work with, and they come in normally and help us write items and work on the exams, and we've been having to move those meetings to virtual meetings, so that's a new experience for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we have been able to overcome that, and we're able to keep up with everything that we need to do.
What advice do you have for somebody that's registered? I guess we're in 2020, so October is coming up for the next exam. I've seen announcements where they have kind of caps on how many people can go to a conference center or whatever, and you've had to open up other places. So has there been other areas that have had to deal with that? Or it looks like
Well,
California was one.
California was one. Just backing up to April, when we canceled April, we were
Mm-hmm.
expecting a good many, obviously more people in October. So what we did was we went to we actually came up with a way to do the exams over 2 days using the same test centers, that obviously the testing locations that will obviously be cleaned, but overnight. But we have 3 of the civil exams are being given on Thursday, the 22nd, and 2 of them are being given on Friday. So we're trying to split so that we can social distance and do everything that we need to do to meet all the guidelines. And so everyone, which, as far as I know, don't hold me to this, but I believe everybody should have their own table, and obviously they will be socially distanced. They'll be, but they will be required to wear masks, and our proctors will be required to wear masks. And so we were able to do that for October. And yes, we have to meet the state, whatever's going on in the state guidelines. So we had to put caps in certain places. California we basically give in 5 locations in California, and 4 of those we were unable to give. So Pomona and San Diego, the southern part of California, we had to scramble in the last month, and basically we found a place in Las Vegas where we could go ahead, and yes, it's a casino, where the restrictions aren't as tight as they are in California, and we're able to still social distance and all that. And so we gave that opportunity to all those. We basically moved everyone, but if they wanted to cancel, that was fine. We obviously gave them their money back. Northern California, San Francisco and Sacramento, they're going to Reno, same thing. And so, and then there have been some other states, test centers in other states, we've had to move people, but that was obviously our largest one. Gotcha. Oregon, we actually have an issue with Oregon that we're working on now, and it's because of the fires, has nothing to do with COVID, but the test center that we're using, that we planned on using in Oregon, has been made into an evacuation center. So we're having to move that around. So
welcome to 2020. Huh?
Welcome to 2020. So one thing we did try to do to help mitigate some of this, and especially for the civil engineers, was we added an additional administration between October and April in January, and that took. We had to get special permission from our board of directors to do that. It will be a regional administration. We can't offer, it's just not enough time to find testing sites in every state. So there are regional, and you can find that on our website. I believe there's 13 places where we'll be administering the exam, and only for this administration will examinees be able to cross boundaries. Typically in the pencil and paper world, if you're in Utah, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm in
So
Utah.
if you were licensed, if you were applying to Utah, you had to take the exam in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have permission for people to go to different test centers.
Wow.
And so that'll be January the 26th, I believe. And so that'll be in 13 or 14, I think, different places.
Wow.
And then in April, again, we're making it a 2-day examination administration. So to again, make sure we're able to social distance and all that. So
That
yeah,
is just
there's,
crazy with how fast you have to adapt to this and make changes on the fly. Yeah, I mean, do you in the future, I mean, do you see more challenges? Do you feel like you got a handle on the COVID situation and how you're doing it? Do you think it'll be smoother moving
well, I
forward?
think, yeah, moving forward, I think with the test centers and using Pearson VUE, uh, those are much smaller facilities, so there are only 15
Yeah.
seats or so in each one, but they are all over the country. They are, and we work with them. They have a group that is totally dedicated to capacity. That's their job,
Okay.
and so we are working with them to say, hey, we've got, 20 some thousand civil examinees a year. When we're ready to start appointments, you've got to be able to handle that. And so they are working with that. And if there are issues, being able to give it, year round is obviously makes it much more flexible. You see what happens when we have a pencil and paper
Yeah.
twice a year. When we have to cancel one, it makes it a big challenge.
Are the students that are registered for either October or that January one, you can't, if you failed in October, you can't take the January one, right? You're kind of grouped in that same quarter or whatever you want to call it. That
Yeah, we
time
will
frame.
group. The registration for January hasn't opened yet,
Okay.
and so it probably will open. It may not open before. Well, and it may close actually before everyone gets their
Okay.
results for October. So
Okay.
yeah, so people, and
No, you're not going to do that.
honestly it's for the people who who couldn't find a place or decided they'd rather not take the exam in October. It's really to try and serve all of those folks
Good.
that were not able to take the exam in October.
I guess before I leave COVID, is there anything else you want to mention or announce or anything on your mind?
Oh gosh. Well, at the Pearson VUE test centers, you are also required to wear a mask, and they do.
Sure.
Obviously, they wipe down all of the equipment, and
Okay.
they're following all the same guidelines. And some states are starting to relax their requirements a little bit. So
Okay.
Pearson VUE's been able to add capacity at other sites. I think is everybody just hang in there. It's this is unprecedented, and the testing industry is is responding to this as well. One quick thing that I know people will probably say, what about remote testing where I can take it at my house
Okay.
and I've got somebody watching me take the exam? Our exams are not set up for that at this time because they are, they're 8-hour exams for the PE exams, and that's for home internet and things like that. It's just not, uh, our exam program is not really set up for that at this point, but that's something we'll be looking at in the future as we get everything transitioned. Is that something we want to try and add into the mix?
Wow,
So
that would be
while we
interesting.
currently can't do that, we are looking at it in the future.
Wow, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
I guess just to switch gears, kind of want to ask you some other questions that other people have brought up. Maybe you could give some insight on them.
Sure.
What we've seen on testing results that as a repeat taker, the pass rate really drops as a repeat taker. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, uh, people may not like my answer to this, but when you look at the the first time takers. When you look at that pool of people who are taking the exam for the first time, and that's that, when you see the pass rate for first time takers, that's this group. You're going to have within that group who are taking it for the first time, you're going to have some high performing people, some middle performing people, and some low performing people.
Mm-hmm.
And when they take the exam, what happens? Well, almost all of the high performing people will probably pass.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the middle performing people will pass. And maybe, probably the lower performing people will not pass. So the next time we give the exam and you have this repeat taker pool, who all is in that pool? Well, it's mostly the low performing people, and
From the
maybe some
first
middle
one.
performing people who maybe had a bad day or whatever. And so when they take the exam the next time, who's going to pass? Well, the probably the middle performing people maybe that had a bad day the first time, and people who were low performers on the first exam, if they change their study habits and how they prepared for the exam, then they will probably pass as well. But in general, if you don't change what you're doing, the old Einstein thing, you do the same thing and expect different results.
Mm-hmm.
The chances are they may fail again. So that's why that pass rate is low. It really has to do with the who's in that pool.
That makes
The
sense.
the one thing in common is that they've all failed the exam previously. So
Gotcha.
unless they change how they do things,
Good
they're not.
advice.
Yeah.
I like to tell people too that even though you're a repeat taker doesn't mean you're a horrible engineer. Many people
No.
repeat the exams. It just means you need to put in more effort and change your study habits. There's something that you haven't done that's not clicking there. So
Well, and there are some people who will take the exam maybe before they're ready, but you want to go ahead and take it to see
mm-hmm.
what it's what it's all about. There's a thing called decoupling,
Mm-hmm.
which you may have heard of, which many states now allow you to take the PE exam without 4 years experience. Once you pass the FE exam, you can go ahead and take the PE exam. And the PE exam is a principles and practice exam. So, and if you look, we have a publication on our website called Squared. If you go
Mm-hmm.
look for that, there's a chart on there, and it shows that the people with the highest pass rate of first-time takers are typically people with 4 to 5 years experience. And honestly, that's who we're writing the exam around, is testing those people.
Yeah.
So if you don't have as much experience, or if you have a lot of experience, but maybe have moved out of the technical arena and more into management, your pass rate is not as high.
That makes sense.
So that's another reason sometimes the repeat takers, it might be people who don't have the experience, and so they end up failing and are back in the repeat pool. But when they study or get more experience, they pass.
That makes sense. I've had a lot of people that I've interacted with that are from other countries. How has the NCEES organization, worked with that? How are they growing outside of the U.S.? How do people take an exam outside the U.S.?
Well, typically, our role is licensure in the United States.
Yes.
That's our role now. We have worked with some countries. If a country, we currently don't actively go out and try to promote or look for different places to take the exam. However, if a country is interested in working with us, typically we'll work with someone who is like their equivalent NSPE or somebody like that,
Okay.
and we will come up with an agreement with some government or a governmental entity that, hey, they would like us to offer our exams in their country, and then we go through this process to do that. And then so they can go ahead and take the exam in that country, but if they want to be licensed here, they still have to meet all of the requirements for licensure. They have to apply to a licensing board, but they would already have the exam out of the way.
That makes sense.
So that makes it very, a little more convenient for people who might be moving to, or doing work over here to be licensed. So we offer the exams, and it's all on our website, in Japan and Korea and in Saudi and Qatar or Qatar, depending on how
Wow.
you like to say it.
Yeah.
We offer, and many of them we offer. We're not adding any new countries. We haven't any new requests until we get everything converted, because obviously to CBT, because obviously if they have a Pearson VUE test site there, it makes things much easier rather than shipping exams back and forth
Yeah.
and finding proctors and all that. So
That makes sense. I
yeah.
had a previous guest. This is just a question I was thinking of on the show, and he was trying to help the Latinos that came from Mexico that had engineering degrees to become licensed professionals here in the United States. And I know everyone has to meet the same requirements when registering to take the exams, but is it difficult when you go to another school in another country to try to get qualified to take the exam here in the States?
It can be.
Yeah.
Again, each state has their own qualifications and requirements, and some of them are more strict than others. As far as what is required, some states don't have any requirements or have less requirements to take the exam, but obviously you have to meet all the requirements to become licensed. So while they may allow you to go ahead and take the exam without even dealing with the licensing board, basically just saying, I'd like to take this, for your board, and they say, okay, that's fine, go take the exam and come see us after you pass.
Okay.
And unfortunately, they're all different. But on our website, if you go look at each state, you can see what their requirements are. That's all available on there.
Okay, good. I want to ask you this question, but what threats do you see to licensure that are within states? I know that could be a long discussion, but in general, what do you see from your angle?
Well, there have been concerns, obviously, in the last couple of years with licensure, and many state legislatures, and there are several entities who are looking at, are we over-regulating professions? And unfortunately, they are grouping all professions together.
Yes.
So NSPE is very involved in this. We are very involved in this. There's a group, again, acronyms. It's ARPL, ARPL, and it's a group of other professions besides us. I believe the architects are in that group, NSPE, ASCE. I think some of the technical societies are in there. I'm not positive, but you can Google that, and they look to how they can help in other states. And the biggest thing we're trying to do there is educate the public on, licensure for engineers. I mean, there are some states that would do away with licensure if they could, and buyer beware. It's up to the buyer to determine if somebody's qualified to do their work or not, and that they might, are we going to have signs on bridges? This bridge was not designed by a licensed professional. Think about that before you cross it. So yeah, there are a lot of threats, and that, honestly, Isaac, that's one of the concerns we have from an examination standpoint. If we're not able to give exams and we're not able to examine people, that's part of the licensing process. Somebody may say, well, gosh, hey, do we even need to have this license? You're holding us up. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to be very proactive in coming up with these additional ways of taking the exams and trying to pull in the CBT transition on others.
Yeah.
It's
you
scary.
walk into like a barber shop, every state has, you get the same license, for in the Utah, it's a blue little license. And,
sure.
You know, you go get your hair cut, they have the same license that I have. It looks exactly the same. So all
And
these
you know,
states are grouping all that in the
that's
same
right.
file.
They're grouping everybody the same. And while certainly many professions require licensure, you know, there are other professions that may not need to be as strict. But that's not for me to say. But
Right.
but I hate to see it painted with with a broad brush that licensing professionals is bad.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
there is a definite place for licensure, and it's needed.
Okay. Well, this is fun. I really appreciated your time jumping on. Maybe just like one last question that I have is, what advice would you give to somebody preparing for the PE exam?
Well, certainly, uh, you know, be prepared for, uh, you know, whatever happens from a logistics standpoint. I mean, I would certainly recommend, you know, the day before that you make sure you scope out where your parking is, and make sure for the pencil and paper exams, that you scope out what, you know, are you going to be able to go out for lunch and come back, because we do have very strict rules, and I
Mm-hmm.
know they're strict, but they need to be, and they need to be consistent. And so you know, if people don't follow the rules, then that's always a problem. So
Leave that cell
obviously,
phone in your car.
yeah, leave that cell phone in your car, and make sure your calculator's on the approved list. And you know, and unfortunately we have to have those rules because you know, somebody has tried to do that. Like on the
Sure.
airplane, it says don't open this door during flight. Well, somebody's tried that before, and now we have to have a
Mm,
sign on it. So we have to
unfortunately.
have rules because people have tried to circumvent the rules.
Okay. Well, is there a resource or a book that you've recently read that would help engineers? It doesn't, I mean, I'm not talking about PE resources because I think everybody knows where to find those things, but has there been an interesting book that's helped you or might help other engineers?
Um, yeah, I read a book. Oh, it's been many years ago, but I do. I pull it out occasionally and look at it. It was a book called Built to Last,
Mm,
and it's really more about, especially if you're ever looking at wanting to build your own business. And it was a book on visionary companies, like uh, how they what made them different than their competitors. And they did like some in-depth looks at like Disney and Ford, and uh, you know, some of the different technology companies. And I just found it fascinating. There were a lot of things that came out of there. I actually have a thing
got
here
it
pinned
hiding
over.
over there?
Yeah, pinned over here. Not the book itself, but there was a bunch of things that were points that I
Oh,
got out of it, that I've
there you
typed
go.
up and printed on here. You know, that of how to make your company, or you know, a visionary company. You know, don't tell time, build a clock, kind of thing. You know,
That's
make it
great.
for. So that's one, Built to
Okay.
Last.
All right. We'll
Yeah.
recommend that to people. That's great. Is there any last piece of wisdom, advice, anything that we feel like we want to get out to the people?
Gosh. Well, like I said, everybody be safe, and be patient. Be you know, be respectful. You know, I know nobody wants to wear a mask while they take the exam. I wouldn't either.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to be able to do that and be truthful. If you know, we're going to ask you, you're going to be asked if you had any symptoms or anything like that, and you know, please be truthful. We'll do everything we can to make other opportunities available. And then we'll all get through this together. And if people want to get in touch with us, or if you have questions,
Mm-hmm.
if they go to their My NCEES page,
Okay.
in the very top right hand corner by where their name is, there's a question mark up there. And if you click on that, there will be a lot of FAQ kind of things and all that. But there's also an ask spot where if you have a question, you know, whether it's technical about the exams or about your exam site, just anything that you're going through that you need answered, that's the best place to ask that question. And that way that gets into our help system, and it gets routed to the appropriate people. And so.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for coming on today, Tim. I really do appreciate it. I think you've shared a lot of value and just a lot of questions people might have that you've given answers to. I think that was very, very insightful.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and and again, if there's any questions or anything, go through our help system, and if it's something that needs to rise to my level to answer, and they do, I answer my share as well. But so we'll be happy to help however we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. We'll see you
All
later.
right. Thanks.
I'm going to pause this. It's going to be sweet. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Isaac here. Uh-oh. Stuff dropping all around me. So